What's up, WeldTube family? It's Abraham from Houston, Texas, coming at you from South Coast Welding Academy. In tonight's video, we got a special treat for y'all. We got a crew coming all the way from Salisbury, from Henderson, Texas. I got a welder and a fitter. And in tonight's video, they're gonna show you how to lay down a branch test using the template. Nah, not really. It can be using the blue book.
All right, y'all, this is Grant Shannon. I'm a specialty welder for Salisbury Industries in Henderson, Texas.
And I'm a pipe fitter for Salisbury Industries in Henderson, Texas. Today we're going to show you how to do a branch test out the blue book.
We're about to get ready to lay out this 12-inch by 12-inch branch. Instead of using the template, we're going to be going over this, laying it out on page 29 out of the W. Graves Pipe Fitters Blue Book.
12 on 12 riser. All right, first you're going to lay out the pipe. It's going to be a 12-inch riser. And you want to mark your 0, your 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And then after 4, you go back to 3, 2, 1, 0, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And that should be 16 numbers right there. And you're going to enter your numbers right here on your 12 by 12 riser. Which they give you 7/16 on the, that's gonna be number 1. Then you got 1 5/8, number 2. 3 1/4 on 3, and then you got 4 1/4 on 4. All right, first number we're gonna do 4 1/4. We're gonna add 1 inch so we can take 1 inch off for our burn mark. 5 1/4, and then we got to do, what we're gonna do, 1 foot?
1 foot.
All right.
All right, so the reason why our last measurement on here is actually 4 1/4, but if you'll notice that we measured this crow's foot 1 inch back. We burned 1 inch from this side because sometimes in the field you'll deal with pipe that's not square on the end. So if you have pipe that's not square on the end, it'll mess up your layout in the long run when you go to fit your seams up.
And go ahead, yeah, tell them about the seams too.
And then, so before we cut anything, before we measure anything else, if you look right in here, you want to locate where your seam is. So if you have this seam that gets in the spot of where they're going to cut your straps out on the bend test, it'll bust because of that seams in there. So the first thing before we do anything, we're going to locate the seam and mark it out with soapstone so we know to move it away from the cutting area and the welding area. All right, so we're going to roll this over. We'll roll it up, we'll mark it on the outside of the pipe.
That's good right there.
All right, so now we know where the seam is, so we're going to put the seam on the bottom of the pipe, and then we're going to go lay out our branch. So let's roll it back over. All right, seam's on the bottom. All right, so now we're going to take a piece of receipt tape and we're going to wrap it all the way around here, around the pipe, and then we're going to cut this out so we can make 16 different marks. As if you remember, we got 16 marks over here on the table for 16 different measurements. All right, so we'll take our receipt tape, set this to the side.
Wrap around the pipe.
Wrap it around the pipe.
Yeah, bro.
All right.
I'm gonna overlap it too so we can get a straight cut.
All right, you wanna make sure that you don't have any creases or any folds in this so that we can get the receipt paper to be square on the pipe. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna take my hand from the bottom, I'm just gonna push it up and smooth all that out to where it's all flush against the pipe. So that way it makes a really square mark. This is important, guys. So you gotta really make sure this is where you're gonna pull everything from. So if this if this line isn't square, then the rest of your cut's not gonna be square. So we're gonna make sure that we get this as square as possible, all right?
Yep.
So now he's gonna take a knife or a box
pocket
cutter.
knife. Everybody should have a pocket knife. And you just mark it between 2, and then it's gonna give you your circumference of the pipe.
All right. So now we got our circumference of the pipe right here. So then the next step, put this receipt paper to the side, and we're going to take it and we're going to fold it in half. Fold it in half once, and you want to make sure that it's close as you can get it when you do your folds. Fold it in half one time, fold it in half again, fold it in half again. I want to make sure all your corners match up, guys. This is real important right here. All right, we're going to fold it in half one more time. So we folded it in half a total of 4 times. What we're going to do now is Chris is going to cut all 4 corners out of the pipe, and you'll see why here in just a second. All right, so now that he's got all 4 corners cut out, it should look like this when you get through with it. So now we're going to take it, we're going to wrap it around. And remember, we're still going off of our same mark that we had on the first time. So we're going to line our receipt paper back up, get all the creases out and all the folds out so it's flush against the pipe. All right, take your hand, smooth it over. Take my hand from the bottom side, get that crease out, and then just let it hang from the top. All right, and now that everything matches up, we're going to use these to make crow's feet so we know where to put our measurements from the blue book. All right, we're going to mark it. I know some people only like to mark it on one side, but we're going to mark it on both sides just so whenever we put our straight line on there, we got 2 different points of contact to make the line even straighter. So we got all of our crow's feet laid out and 16 different spots on the pipes for our 16 different measurements. Now the next thing we need to do, we need to get a straight line from right here all the way to right here. And I know some people, they'll use a 2-foot square, but sometimes the 2-foot square can turn just like this to where the measurement's not true. So my boy Chris here's got a piece of angle iron that we're going to use.
Just from experience.
Just from experience in the field, guys, always keep a piece of scrap angle iron somewhere to transfer measurements. So you know that if like the piece of angle iron is kind of hanging off to the side, you'll know to just push it back to where both sides are flush. See, like right here, if we mark this right here, the line's going to go crooked and it's not going to go true to on the center of the pipe. So all you got to do is just make sure the angle iron's flush, and then we'll transfer our marks from right there all the way down to the end. And we'll do that 16 times, guys. All right. All right, guys, so this is a typical pipeline test. Typically, anywhere you go in the country or anywhere you go in the world, it's going to be a 12-inch butt weld or a 12-inch and a 12-inch by 12-inch branch test. So some companies don't want you to use a template for when you go to take a test. So you have to know how to make these measurements and make these cuts to lay the blue book or to lay it out from the blue book. Most of the time, if you go out in the laydown yard somewhere, the pipe is going to be what's called fusion bond pipe. So this stuff is going to have a real thick green paint coating on there. So before you do this, you want to make sure, of course, our piece of pipe doesn't have any coating on it today, so we don't have to worry about it. But if you go to a yard somewhere, just make sure, clean all the coating off of the pipe before you start on there. And you always want to make sure you got a real sharp piece of soapstone. The sharper you can get your soapstone, the better your lines and the better your branch is going to come out. All right, guys, so the next step we're going to do, we're going to take a wrap around to get a square line coming off of our crow's foot that we measured 5 1/4 from the edge of the pipe. So let's do that. All right, we're going to treat the wrap around the same way we did that receipt paper, guys. You want this as flush on the pipe as you can get it. So I'm going to take it, I'm going to wrap it around. Overlap it. All right, guys, so we're going to take all the creases and all of that out so we got the most square line we can get where it's all the way flush up against the pipe.
You got it tight?
Got it tight, yep. All right. All right, guys. So now that we have we're gonna call this our reference line. So every measurement that we pull to lay the branch out is gonna come from this line. So it's real important that this line is as square as you can get it. Because if it's off 1/8 of an inch over here and 1/8 of an inch over here, then your branch is gonna come out 1/8 of an inch and you'll have to do a lot more grinding. It's gonna be a lot harder to fit it up. So you wanna really make sure that you get this line as square as you can get it with the wraparound.
Yeah, we're gonna put the seam on between what, 2 and 3?
Yeah, so whenever they cut your straps out on your branch test, they're gonna cut it from whenever they do the throat and the ear, and that's gonna be at 4 and at 0. So you wanna have your seam somewhere where they're not gonna cut the strap for your test. Because the seam could possibly have a defect in it that you don't know about. And this is something that a lot of people won't tell you. You gotta make sure that you put your seam away from your strap.
All right, let's roll it up this way.
All right, guys. So we got our seam right here marked on the outside of the pipe.
So we're gonna go ahead and put 2, 3, 4. Then this be 1, and then go ahead and roll it up. 0. Then we're gonna have.
All right, and then we're gonna relate back to our circle from over here on the table. It's gonna be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then go back to 3, 2, 1, 0, all the way around the pipe, guys.
And then we got 4.
All right, guys, that's all of them. And so now, the next step, we got it laid out here on the table, but we're gonna go back to the blue book. Always double check your measurements, guys. All right, so we got our first number. The first measurement they give us for number 1 is 7/16. So now the next thing we're gonna do, and we're gonna figure out where we have number 1 on the pipe, and we're gonna pull 7/16 away, going this way for our measurement on the number 1. So number 1 is our first, number 2 is our second, and so on and so forth. So he's gonna mark 7/16 away from our reference line that we made with the wraparound. All right, 7/16. And then we're gonna go back to number 2. Our second measurement is 1 5/8 inches. So he's gonna go to number 2 on our line, and he's gonna go 1 5/8 inches away. And what he's doing right here is he's burning an inch, guys, or burning a foot, so he can make a better measurement. All right, so 1 5/8 inches. Then we got number 3. Our third measurement is gonna be 3 1/4 inches. All right, so now for our fourth measurement is gonna be 4 1/4 inches. So he's gonna mark 4 1/4 inches. All right, now you guys should be already able to see the curvature of the branch that we're laying out start to come together. So we're gonna roll the pipe just a little bit. All right. And now we're gonna go back from 4 to 3. So he's gonna go for 3, 3 1/4. All right, he's gonna go to number 2, which is 1 5/8 inches. He's gonna go back to number 1 to 7/16. All right, so now we're at 0, and 0 doesn't get a measurement. All right, so we're gonna roll the pipe. All right, and then we go back to 1. You did the same thing all the way around, guys. So 1, we're gonna go back to 7/16. These steps are important, guys, so just whatever you do, don't get in such a hurry that you miss a measurement or put the wrong measurement on the wrong line. So just really make sure to take your time with this. All right, so we're gonna go back to number 1, roll the pipe. So the next thing we have to do is we have to trace all along our measurements that we just pulled from our reference line. So instead of having to try and freehand this, you want to use something like a straight edge or something that you can figure out how to make the curvature of your lines match up. And I've seen some people that like to use a wraparound, but what we find is sometimes the wraparound doesn't bend very sharp, or it doesn't bend in the right way. So sometimes it can be difficult if you're doing this by yourself and you don't have somebody here to help you like we have here today. So sometimes your lines will come out on a straight line instead of a curved line. So what we came up with here at the shop, and this is only if you think this will work for you, then try it out by all means, guys. There's always more than one way to do something. You may find something this may work better for you. So what we have here is a 3/32 diameter piece of TIG wire. So we found that you use a smaller diameter TIG wire will bend to the curvature of the pipe a lot easier than, say, if we were trying to use like a 5/32 or a 3/16 diameter wire. If you have a piece of TIG wire handy, I recommend you guys really try this out because we found it helps a lot making the marks. So what we're going to do with this now, I'm going to give it over to Chris.
We're going to start at 0.
We're going to start at 0 on our reference line.
You want to mark your first, 3 points is which is 0, 1, 2, and then 0, 1, 2. So
yeah, you don't want to try and lay this whole thing out at the same time, guys. So what he's going to do, he's going to match them all up to these crow's feet and these measurements that we made. He's going to match it.
And we can make 6 marks right here.
Right, so we're going to check it over to make sure. Always double check your stuff, guys.
All right.
All right, so he likes it. So we're going to trace around our TIG wire all the way until it can stop right there. And we're going to roll the pipe just a little bit.
And on 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2 this way, now you got to flip.
Now flip it over, right?
Because we're making a saddle.
And another thing he's doing is he's setting his TIG wire down and he's bending it over to where it matches up with all of our measurements we got right here, guys.
All right, hit them 3.
All right. All right. We'll roll the pipe.
Yeah, that's it. And we're gonna hit 1.
We're gonna do
2,
the same thing all the way around, guys.
3.
All right, so he's got it. So we're gonna make sure all of these are matched up to our crow's feet, which they are. We'll take it. And be real light on your hand when you're making your measurements or when you're making your line. You don't want to push the TIG wire away from the mark, guys.
All right, now we're back to 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2.
So we're gonna lay out 4 points of 4 measurements.
So we start on 0, bend over 1, 2. Then you're gonna bend over 1, 2 right there. And if you like it, mark it.
All right.
All right, now we gotta flip back to this way. And we're gonna hit right there. All right.
All right.
This is where it's gonna meet back up. And we'll have it all laid out right there. All right.
All right, guys, there it is. Now roll it. So now you can see we got the curvature of our pipe to lay out our saddle now, if you can see right there. All right, so the next step that we're gonna have is to ask your QC man or whoever's administering the test to you how long they want your riser on your branch to be. Sometimes they may want it 8 inches from right here, or they may want it a foot from the 0 mark or the foot from the 4 mark. So you always want to make sure and ask to specify before you make your cut how long they want the test to be.
We're gonna go a foot from 0, just so it can have a good height distance on it. So we'll burn a foot on 0 and then mark a foot here.
All right, so we have 1 reference mark right here, and then we're going to do the same thing on the other side, guys.
Right there's good.
All right.
So we got mark here.
And the reason why we're marking this in 2 different spots is so whenever we make our wraparound line, we got 2 different points to make sure that our line is square. All right, so he's got it burned a foot right there from our reference mark, and we're going to go back to right here, crow's foot. Now we got a foot for our test dimensions. So now we're going to come back to our wraparound. All right, so we're going to make sure, again guys, you want your wraparound to be as flat on the pipe, and see like this right here, you don't want any overlap in your wraparound. So what we're going to do, we're going to bring that back, and you want to flatten all of those bubbles back out to where it's completely flat on the pipe. And this may take a little bit of time, but that's okay guys, because it's really important. All right guys, we got it all flat up against the pipe and it's all square. So we're going to go ahead and make our mark. All right, guys. So sometimes that we've ran into in the field before, whenever you go to cut this as our next step, if you cut it just off of a soapstone line, sometimes your glasses are really dark and sometimes the torch will actually burn away your line that you made. So a tip that we have for you guys that me and him kind of came up with is to take a center punch and a hammer and punch all of your lines right where they intersect our measurements on each reference line. So what he's going to do is he's going to go through there and punch that with the center punch. So now that we'll be able to see that a lot easier when we go to cut it with a torch. All right.
Now what you do is connect the dots. Just so you can see better, because when we go to cutting it, we're gonna have to have face shield. So you wanna connect your dots, make it a little bit brighter so you can see. And as you can see now, how much better that looks than the soapstone mark. Always get you about 1 inch when you're setting your torch. And then turn your oxygen on. You don't want that right there when you're setting your torch. So what you do is you blow it. That's a good setting right there for when you're cutting. All right, we're gonna start cutting this right here, 3 points at a time. There we have our 12 on 12 riser.
All right, guys, we got our saddle cut out. Now we're about to do a rough clean with the grinder to get all of our slag off of it. And then we're gonna come over here and set it back on a horizontal piece to make sure it fits right. All right, guys, so we just went through with the tiger paw and a 7-inch 1/8 grinder disc and got a rough clean on here. And then after we get done with this, we're about to go set it on top of the pipe to make sure it sits flush.
Right now we got to take off about at least 2 inches. So right now we're gonna take off about 2 inches, about right here where I have that grind mark right there.
And make sure to do it with the tiger paw so that way it's real smooth on the inside and it doesn't leave any jagged cuts. All right, guys, you can see we got the seam grinded back to about 1.5 to 2 inches, so that way there's no possible way for this seam to interfere with our test cut.
Smooth.
And that's real. He used the tiger paw, so it's real smooth, guys. You want to make this as presentable as you can. The inspector's not going to like to see a bunch of cut marks or anything like that if you were to use the 1/8 grinding disc or a cutting disc. Next up, we're going to set it on top of the pipe. And we're going to look straight down in it this way and make sure we want this piece to sit as flush on top of the horizontal piece as we can get. You don't want any kind of gaps or any kind of light showing through the inside, because the light means that there's no metal there, so you're going to have a big gap when you go to fit it up. I cannot stress enough how important the fit up is on this test, guys.
The way around.
Yeah, that's what you want it to look like all the way around, guys. You don't want any light shining through.
So all this light right here, we got to grind it down to where it shuts, where you see no light.
We'll take a piece of soapstone on the inside. You got a piece of soapstone?
Right.
We'll take a piece of soapstone on the inside and we'll lay it down on the pipe on the pieces where it is touching. So about right there. We'll mark it so that way whenever we go take it to the grinding table, we'll know to smooth that back down so it sits flush on this horizontal piece. We got one spot right there. And it looks like we got one more right there. And guys, this may take several attempts from taking your riser piece back and forth to the grinding table to smooth it down and setting it back on here and back and forth. But like I said, I cannot stress enough that you really got to make sure that this fits on there as flush as you can get it so you can come out with the best test result. So it may take several times of cleaning and grinding. It's going to take a lot of work, but it'll definitely pay for itself in the end.
And also too, don't forget to roll your seam. Right here, we have it on the top, so we got to roll this seam back down to the bottom, so when we cut our hole, we're not cutting into that seam.
All right, guys, so we got a rough cut, or we got a rough clean on this, and now we're going to go through and explain the beveling process of your vertical piece. So if you look from our 3 mark all the way over here to our other 3 mark, this is going to get a slight bevel on it. But if you look over here from this 3 mark and back on the throat, this right here isn't going to get a bevel on it. So after we're done, after the final cleanup, this is going to be flat. So whenever they cut your test straps out, they're going to cut one from right here to right here, and they're going to cut one from right here to right here where they cut your straps out. So these are the most important parts that we're going to worry about on the fit. So that way you got the best chance possible to pass your test in between here, 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 and here for where they cut your 4 straps at. All right, guys, we got the pipe all sucked down. We did our grinding on the outside to make sure it would fit on the pipe flush. And we got it laid back on the bevel right here and on the sides. Now we're about to trace the inside of the cookie so we can cut it out to set this piece inside the horizontal piece. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take a scribe. And I know sometimes you may not have a scribe handy, but if you don't, you can take an 1/8 inch or whatever size welding rod and just sharpen it with the grinder and get the same, get the same result. Sometimes you may not have a scribe. All you have to do is just sharpen this with the grinder and mark it on your inside. So now I'm gonna get Chris to hold the riser on steady. We're gonna take our scribe mark and we're gonna scribe on the inside and on the outside, guys. So we're gonna mark all the way around on the inside. All right, guys, we got our scribe line traced out. And if you guys want to come take a look, we're about to trace over this with the white paint marker.
As you can see, when we put our shield on, we could barely see that scribe mark. So that's why we're gonna use this Metal Pro white paint marker. And we're gonna trace over all this so we can get a good cut. Remember to always cut to the inside, because we're gonna keep this piece, so when you're blowing your torch, cut to the inside of the cookie. And just being extra precautious, we're gonna go ahead and punch a little bit on it. That's why we're doing this, is because when we blow through, sometimes the torch will blow this mark away, and you want a good, precise cut. All right, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna wanna keep the outside of this perfect. So when you're cutting, you wanna cut straight into the center of the pipe. So when you pull out, you want to pull out to the inside. So after we get this heated up, just watch as I cut it. As you can see, when I was cutting, I skipped around. That way I wouldn't transfer too much heat onto one side of the pipe. Come over here, let this cool off for a little bit, cut this, and then come over here. It's just called spacing the heat out when you're cutting.
Look at that. That's all I need, one little tap. One little love tap? One little love tap.
And now what we'll do now is we'll clean inside of this, clean all the slag off, get our good bevel on it, so when we put our riser on it, we'll have a good fit.
And remember, we're gonna have to keep this piece over here that we cut out. We normally call it the cookie. You guys may have heard it called something else, but we're gonna have to keep that for later on, and we'll show you why at the end of the video. All right, guys, we got our hole cut out and cleaned up. We got everything prepped up. Now we're about to put the riser on the horizontal piece.
Go ahead and tell them what kind of rod you're using for the space.
All right, guys, so we got a 332 aluminum wire, TIG wires. Use them if you got them. If not, you can use 332 6010s and just knock the flux off. This is what we got here today, so this is what we're going to use.
Just, you can get some tape, any kind of tape, just masking tape, electrical tape, just anything to hold it down when we do our fit up.
So what he's going to do, he's going to tape those TIG wires on there. All right, now we got our TIG wire tape. We're going to take our horizontal piece, our riser.
All right, so what you do is you put it on there. You want to check all your high-low, and as you can see, it's pretty damn perfect. You want your rod to fit in there perfect for the welder. And we got the 332 gap.
Remember, guys, anytime you check the high-low, you always want to check the high-low on the inside because that's where the root's going. The root's going on the inside, not the outside. So everything looks pretty good in here. All right, guys, did all that hard work to get a perfect fit. Now we got to remember, you don't want to mess it up when you put your tacks in here. Here's a pro tip. Whenever they cut the straps for your test piece, they're going to cut right here, right here, and the same for these other two sides. So anywhere you put a tack, you don't want to put a tack in here in case you have a bad tack. So you don't want to put it anywhere they're going to cut a strap out. So we're going to have them tack right here, right here, and then the same for these opposite two sides. You want to give yourself you want to stack all the cards in your favor when it comes to taking a weld test. So they're going to cut a strap right here. So you want to put a tack right there. And one more right here. Guys, he's using an 1/8 inch 6010. He's got a 332 gap, 1/8 land, and he's gonna be running about 77 amps. Maybe. Now you want to make sure you quarter your tacks, guys. Another thing, we're gonna pull these wedges, or we're gonna pull these spacing wires out before he puts the tack in, because if he tacks this back side while we still have these spacers in, you'll never get them out. So what we're going to do, we're going to lift up on this other side just a little bit, and he's going to lift it up with the wedge. And then before Abraham tacks it, we're going to peel the tape off and pull our spacers out, guys. It's also a good idea to have more than one wedge. Just in case it shrinks, you'll have the wedge in there to keep it from shrinking so much. Guys, this gap and this fit up is freaking perfect. All right, guys, so remember now, I told y'all earlier, we got our cookie. So what's gonna happen is we're gonna set this on top, just like this, and then whenever he gets done tacking it, we'll set it on a jack stand. You may need somebody to help you out with this because this is a pretty heavy piece right here. So what we're gonna do, you're not gonna get to weld it like this. You're not getting out that easy. You're gonna set this piece right here onto a jack stand and turn the whole thing over and weld it overhead. All right, guys, there you have it. A 12-inch on 12-inch, 375 wall branch. I just want to say thank you so much for Salisbury Industries and letting us come out here. Thank you for South Coast Welding Academy for the invite. I'm Grant Shannon.
Chris Mendoza.
And we'll catch y'all next time.